Our next guest is a New York Times bestselling author, Politico's White House bureau chief, and the host of Way Too Early, which airs weekdays at 5 a.m. on MSNBC. Please welcome to the show, Jonathan Lemire, everybody. I'm so happy to have you here. I know at this point it's already been a very long day for you.
Yeah, it's past my bedtime.
It's past your bedtime. What time? First of all, I really like that the title of your show, Way Too Early, is obvious. It's honest, I should say, about exactly when it's on TV.
Yeah, it is truth in advertising.
Yeah.
It is 5 a.m. Eastern. It is a great thing to be able to start the day presenting the news of the day, what people need to know as they're getting ready for their day. But Seth, it is way too early.
Yeah, so what time do you actually have to set an alarm in the morning?
So my schedule in the morning is the alarm goes off at 3:10 a.m. And at 3:11 a.m., I question all of my life decisions.
Yeah.
That's followed by a few sort of incoherent snoozes and some coffee and try not to spill it on myself as I get dressed in the dark. I will say, though, coming into the studio here at Rock Center or if I'm in D.C., no traffic at that hour.
Really?
So, yeah.
So that's sort of
you
a
sail right in.
New York City life hack.
Yeah.
It is very nice because I think the most helpful time for a lot of people to get their news would be first thing of the day, right? These are the things they need to be aware of today. Have you had people come up to you with an appreciation? Obviously, there's a certain kind of person who's watching the news at 5 in the morning. They must appreciate that there's someone like you who's, putting their effort into it.
Insomniacs. That's the word you're looking for.
Yeah.
We do get some night owls from the West Coast who haven't gone to bed yet. But we do. There are people who are up early because their days start early. And that could be a corporate CEO or someone, driving a city bus. We do, and we try to deliver that news to everyone. It is a start to the day. And we know mornings are about routines. You're trying to get out the door. And my show, and then I'm around on Morning Joe afterwards for a few hours. It's a responsibility that we take seriously.
And what time do you go to bed?
So the goal is around 9.
Okay.
9 p.m., which is still not nearly enough sleep, and I know that. But we, two kids at home, 2 boys, 11 and 8. So that's pushing it, because their bedtime is supposed to be 8:30, 8:45. Sometimes they get a kick out of tucking Dad into bed, and then they can play another hour of Mario Kart.
You also, you've been a traveling reporter as well. You covered the 2016 presidential campaign. You received a lot of attention for a question you asked Donald Trump in Helsinki when he was on stage, very famously, with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Can you tell us a little bit about the question and what it was like in the moment as you were asking those two gentlemen?
Sure. So this was the summer of 2018. This was then President Trump's much anticipated first and only summit with Vladimir Putin. There, of course, had been questions for years about what connections he may have to Russia. This was the height of the Mueller probe, the investigation into his ties there, potential ties to Moscow. And I was at the Associated Press at the time. And it was, it's a limited press conference. Only a couple reporters got questions. And I was called on. And I asked.
Did you know? Is that something where or do you have a sense? So you.
No.
Okay.
You don't. I mean, it's. I certainly had been petitioning to say,
Sure.
Look, I'd like to get a question. This is a big moment. Some important things need to be asked. But you don't know until that moment. Often, Donald Trump would choose not to answer my questions. He would go out of his way to ignore.
Usually he's such a straight shooter. That's weird.
Yeah. It was surprising.
He was probably jet lagged.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. But he did this time. And the way it works is in these news conferences, presidential news conferences, you get one question to each leader. So to President Trump, I simply asked him, I said, the U.S. intelligence officials, all of them, say that Moscow, Russia, interfered with the 2016 election. Vladimir Putin, the man standing next to you, just denied it. Who do you believe? And he pretty clearly signaled that he believed Russia, that he did not believe the assessment of his own intelligence agencies. And then my question to Vladimir Putin was, did the Russians have any compromising material on Donald Trump or his family? You may recall there were some salacious rumors back then as to stuff they may or may not have had, some compromise. And I will note, as Putin answered the question, and by the way, when he talks to you, he doesn't break eye contact. Mm-hmm. It's pretty terrifying, and I made sure not to have any tea or step near a window or set of stairs the rest of the day. He gave a long answer about how it would be very challenging to collect compromising material on every prominent American who comes to Russia. He never actually denied it. And I will say a postscript, obviously, that moment, the Helsinki News Conference was seen as one as very damaging for Donald Trump. Even some of his allies in the Republican Party turned on him and said that they couldn't believe, I think John McCain used the word traitorous, that we got back on Air Force One. I was part of the presidential pool, so I was traveling with him back to Washington. And he got on the plane and had thought he had done well. And as soon as he turned on Fox News, he was disabused of that notion and grew so angry that aides later told me that he was so anxious to get home. You know how planes sometimes the pilot will tell you, well, we can make up some time in the air. Air Force One really has the ability to do that. And we shaved about 2 hours off our flight time from Finland. The plane was like shaking on the way back, and we're all hanging on as he was looking to put this behind him.
Now, I want to, something obviously you've been reporting on last week and into this week is the classified document situation. Obviously, we were all well aware of what had happened with the documents that former President Trump was keeping in Mar-a-Lago, and now we're having, obviously, a far smaller amount of documents, but real classified documents that were in President Biden's possession. How do you see this story unfolding? Do you see this as a sort of universal idea that keeping classified material is bad, or do you see it developing into sort of a partisan story where we're losing our focus?
Yeah, so we're certainly covering this every day, both on MSNBC and Politico, and it is much more of a political story than it is a legal one for President Biden. There's certainly, at least for what we know of now, and it's still developing, we're still learning about it, it seems it's about a dozen or so documents seemingly inadvertently packed away where they shouldn't have been. And to be clear, the classified material should not be in the garage of a home in Wilmington, Delaware. That's never okay. But there's no sense of intent that it was done deliberately, and President Biden, unlike his predecessor, has not been accused of trying to willfully obstruct efforts to get that material back. So we have now descended into very much a partisan story, though national security implications, to be clear. Classified material, that matters. That's serious stuff. But this is much more about politics, and we're seeing from a lot of Republicans, I mean, hypocrisy. There's no other way to say it. They didn't care much at all about the hundreds upon hundreds of documents found in Mar-a-Lago. They seem to care quite a bit about this dozen or so found in Delaware and D.C.
Another hypocrisy you've pointed out is they are sort of raising a ruckus about the fact that there were no visitor logs for who came to President Biden's home in Wilmington, Delaware.
Yeah.
But this is obviously, if you were a supporter of President Trump, this would be the sort of height of hypocrisy because visitor logs weren't really his thing.
They were not. I mean, first of all, for any president, it's a personal residence. Visitor logs are not kept, whether it's President Biden's home, Wilmington, Delaware, President Obama's home in Chicago, President Bush's home in Texas, or any of President Trump's homes, Mar-a-Lago, Bedminster, Trump Tower, et cetera. But more than that, President Trump did away with the tradition of releasing visitor logs at the White House itself. So it is very much one where Republicans don't really have a credible leg to stand on.
He's not watching right now, but if President Trump was watching, I think he would like what you just said, because you'd be like, did you hear I had a lot of houses? Did you hear how he mentioned only one Obama?
That's true.
Only one boy? He had to mention like a bunch of my, he missed a few. There's a story, obviously it's being covered. I think that people maybe haven't quite wrapped their heads around how insane this George Santos story is. This is a freshman Republican congressman from New York who was elected, and then his personal biography, it just seems every day is falling apart even more. Maybe hadn't told a single truth about himself. Have you ever seen anything quite like this?
Do you have a favorite George Santos lie?
I mean, saying you're Jewish and then backing off and clarifying that you meant you were ish. Yeah. That, I mean, personally, I found that one very...
That's classic. Another 10 out of 10 no-notes lie is that he claimed to be a volleyball star at Baruch College that won a championship. That part's true. Baruch College won a championship. He had nothing to do with it. He wasn't on the team. He didn't go to the school. But more than that he played so hard, he had to have double knee replacement. Yeah. He had to have both knees replaced, the man in his 30s. He seems pretty spry as he's trying to evade reporters in the Capitol Hill hallways. But to your point, it is remarkable. I mean, certainly we've never had a politician lie A to Z about his biography. George Santos has done that, if that is his real name. But in some ways, it almost seems like the natural evolution of the Trump era, a figure who so much of his career was built on lies. And then, of course, from his campaign to his administration, he would sow distrust with institutions by telling lie after lie after lie. And of course, most of all about the 2020 election, which is what I covered in my book. In some ways, Santos is like, well, he got inspiration.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you see it ending? Do you think he's going to stick it out?
Well, the biggest surprise to me in terms of the day-to-day is the fact that there have been some of his fellow Republicans who have called for him to resign, including those in New York, as well as the Nassau County, that's where he represents, Long Island. That Republican Party have said you should go. He is saying he won't, but in a time of such great partisanship, the fact that any Republicans are willing to say he should go is noteworthy. That said, Republican leadership in the House, they're not doing so. They're even giving a committee assignment. Kevin McCarthy can't afford a single vote. And the other lesson that Santos seemed to learn from Trump, you never apologize, you never say you're sorry, you don't quit. He thinks he can ride it out.
Yeah, he learned all of that from his volleyball coach.
Yeah.
One last thing to ask you about, which is sport. We are Boston sports fans.
Yes.
You're a Boston Red Sox fan. You are raising children in New York City. This is a great fear of mine. Ours are a little younger. They haven't committed. But do you ever worry they're going to come home one day and with some Yankee paraphernalia or tell you that this is the team that they have chosen to throw their life behind?
I mean, they know the stakes. They'd be disowned.
Yeah, okay.
So, no, there's no chance. They are being raised as Red Sox fans. I've lived in New York a long time. It has done nothing to diminish my fandom for the Red Sox. In fact, living among Yankee fans every day just makes me dislike them so much more.
Yeah, I agree. And it was all worth it. It was all worth it to live here in 2004.
Oh, was it ever? Oh, was it ever?
That was the time of my life.
Yeah, and my kids know, as wonderful as it was when they were born, that's second place to 2004 in terms of life highlight.
Everything's been downhill since then. You guys, that's Jonathan Lemire. Way Too Early airs weekdays at 5 a.m. on MSNBC.